So talk to me about how a crypto trader and investor in the United States can receive any of those benefits. Asking for a
Well,
friend.
I would look at a second residence and citizenship because I've had so many people coming and saying when I have to enter my passport details and I'm a US citizen, certain opportunities don't want to deal with me.
What's up, everybody? I'm Scott Melker, and this is the Wolf of All Streets podcast. Today's guest is an expert on accumulating and managing wealth. Coining the term Nomad Capitalist, Andrew Henderson works exclusively with 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors who want to go where they're treated best. His book, Nomad Capitalist, is the #1 bestseller on Amazon and business travel, and his YouTube channel has amassed over 260,000 subscribers. So it's safe to say that people are listening and taking his advice. In this episode, I'm looking forward to discussing the nomad lifestyle and how Bitcoin fits into the equation. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me.
Great pleasure to be in the den.
So let's start from the beginning. Where does the term nomad capitalist come from?
Nomad Capitalist was, I ran numerous businesses in the United States. I started traveling because I realized very early on, when I was probably 20 years old, I was doing business with, back then it was a Vonage phone, and I'm an old school business guy. I got business by picking up the phone and calling people and, do you want to work with me? And I said, this Vonage phone, this voice over IP phone could be anywhere in the world. And so I started to travel. I was very interested in emerging economies. For some reason, I was very interested in Cambodia very, very early on. And I've been a big investor and big fan of Cambodia for years now. But I did all this travel. And eventually I just realized that there are so many other opportunities in other parts of the world. Whether it's social opportunities, met people, friends, dating opportunities, what have you, that were better. It seemed like, interest rates, business opportunities, lower regulations, lower taxes, so many things were better in other countries. Now, there was no one perfect place, but I realized every place had something to offer, and some had a lot to offer. And so as I was selling off the last business, I'm just sitting on my couch thinking to myself, perhaps if I'm going around the world, as I was about to embark full-time going around the world instead of half-time, I said, maybe I'll be some kind of media creature. I wanted to interview people around the world, and I figured I needed some kind of brand. And I just thought, all right, what am I doing? I'm a capitalist. I'm traveling around, Nomad Capitalist, and it stuck. And I started blogging about all my experiences going around, talking to lawyers, talking to accountants, talking to the CEOs of banks, and Bitcoin was a very new thing back then. But talking to a lot of people about doing business around the world, and I was blogging about it, and it became something, as you said, I guess, pretty great. So that's how it all. I never imagined, unlike any other business, that it would become what it's become.
Very, very similar to my story. I sort of loosely branded myself, and then this thing sort of exploded, and here we are.
You got to be careful these days. You got to be careful to make sure it's going to stick.
Yeah, it will definitely stick for better or for worse, I guess, in many instances. So tell me exactly now at this point what you're doing.
Well, what I do now is I still live around the world. I no longer live or spend time in the United States where I'm from. I built up a team of over 30 people, and basically our business is a strategy and execution firm for people who want to have a holistic overseas plan. So if you're in the United States and you are making $1 million a year selling on Amazon, or you've built up $5 million worth of Ethereum, or whatever the case may be, you sold your business. We help people who say, I don't want to live in the US anymore. How do I spend 9 months somewhere else, 3 months here? I want to have a residence in Asia. I want to buy property here. I want to make sure my US taxes are dramatically lowered. How do I do all those things? How do I immigrate to other countries that are tax friendly? How do I structure my company internationally? How do I hire people? How do I invest? How do I buy homes? And so the whole lot basically of stuff that I've gone through and have found it challenging. I'm sitting in a home that I'm in the process of renovating and decorating here in Bogota, Colombia. And we've got a great network of people, but the problem is nobody really speaks to each other. You buy a property, the real estate agent is off. How do I pay my property taxes? I don't know. You have a lawyer, they don't know other stuff. How do you handle the accounting to make sure you're not paying tax in Colombia as a part-time resident? And so we basically, throughout all my travels, and now I've got a team that goes and and finds people and vets people as well. We've built this network of people, and then we can basically be the architect and the general contractor of someone's plan, where it is what I wish existed, basically, which is I hate filling out forms, I hate filling out paperwork, but I like the benefits of that paperwork, and I like the benefits of all this stuff. But you need 7 different people sometimes to make these things work in these more opaque, yet tax-friendly, business-friendly, lifestyle-friendly markets. And so that's what we do, is help people do that.
So talk to me about how a crypto trader and investor in the United States can receive any of those benefits. Asking for a friend.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of different parts. And what I always say is you don't have to go as extreme as I've gone. I went to the point of moving out of the U.S. full-time, later renounced my citizenship. I spent all my time going between different homes. For some people, my lifestyle is so fast-paced. So if I'm a crypto person, number one, I would look at a second residence and citizenship, because I've had so many people coming and saying when I have to enter my passport details and I'm a U.S. citizen, certain opportunities don't want to deal with me. I think everyone in crypto needs to have a backup plan at the very least. And certainly it could be a plan A that you need another passport or residence or address overseas to buy into some deals. I also think if you're a U.S. citizen, I look at the regulations, not only in the U.S. that they're talking about, I look at what they're talking about in other countries. They're going to make you disclose under penalty of perjury if you have crypto. They're going to try and tax it. They're going to try and do all kinds of things. They're talking about a wealth tax. I've never, in reading all the tax publications, we've never seen so much talk about any kind of tax than a wealth tax. Some countries, they don't lie. They say it's just going to be ongoing. South Africa, they talked about as high as 7% a year. Imagine that, right? Other countries say it'll be one time, ha ha ha. So I think that there's lots of different kinds of taxes, lots of kinds of regulations. People were happy about, Joe Biden saying we're going to pull back some of Steve Mnuchin's regulations. I'm not so convinced that they're going to pull them back. I think they're just going to look at them. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice. The U.S. government and many of these other Western governments are not your friend. I would be considering going as far as I went with expatriating, and I have a number of people coming to me right now who are accumulating wealth very quickly. And if they don't leave now, it's going to be a matter of a big tax bill. And so, they call me the goody two-shoes. Someone kind of insulted me with this, and it stuck, and I use it, the goody two-shoes of the offshore business. I don't want to live a life where I'm perjuring myself on Form 1040. I don't want to live a life where I'm cowering in fear. If I have crypto, I want to acknowledge I have crypto. And I've run a channel where I talk about citizenships I've gotten. I'm open about how little tax I legally pay. I'm not hiding assets. And I don't think that works in this year. And I think that anyone who is so, I look back to all of us when we were young and just making money and we thought we're invincible. And I think there's so many people who are newly successful in crypto, which is spectacular, but they think they're going to beat the IRS. And I just think in the long term, the IRS is going to figure out a way to get you. So why not pull some distance between you and the IRS? I'd be living overseas, but the problem is a U.S. citizen, the taxes and regulations follow you. You've got to file all the forms. So
I DJ'd for about 5 months in Japan in 2006, and I ended up in a situation where I actually had to pay taxes in both countries.
Well, right. So now you've got to deal with like tax treaties and foreign tax credits, and sometimes there's not. You have to pay you have to pay dual tax. So Japan, if you're working, not a very tax-friendly country. But I'm afraid for Americans, and I think more countries will do this. I just heard 3 lawyers in the last month coming out and saying they think that more countries will roll out this U.S. citizenship-based taxation. Canada's talked, I hear politicians saying, how come you get to be Canadian, live in Dubai, and not pay us? Well, I thought the taxes were for the roads and the schools and all those things, right? That's what they tell you. But you're not using, and now they still want to tax you. So I think more countries will do it. But for now, I would have, number one, here's the other thing you could do if you're an American, is move to Puerto Rico and at least stage yourself. Right. 0 to 4%.
Yeah, I think the problem for a lot of people is obviously that what you have now still goes with you and there's no benefit. So it's really what you make after you move.
Correct.
Right.
Well, it's the same with expatriation. So, what I'm saying is, here's the story that tells you everything you need to know. During this whole, situation over the last year, the U.S. State Department has informed embassies. Occasionally we find 1 or 2 that are doing their own thing, but they've informed embassies don't process any renunciations. So if you were a crypto investor a year ago and you had $1.8 million and you were just under the exit tax threshold, and now you have $7 million or $10 million, well, now you're well over the exit tax threshold. It's long-term capital gains. Now, what if Joe Biden, with his majority, passes his bill, which makes capital gains rates almost double? Well, you potentially, if let's assume your basis is very low, you potentially just had a $2 million adverse tax event. And so the problem is, for me, leaving the U.S., the greatest thing I got was peace of mind. In that whatever nonsense they want to dream up, I didn't leave because of taxes. I was paying very, very little, if anything, legally. I filed all the forms. I did everything. It was a paperwork nightmare, and I lived in fear. But being out now, I say to myself, no matter what they do, I'm going to be covered. And so I think Puerto Rico is a first step. Getting a second residence overseas, getting a second passport, possibly even buying a home. I know that for crypto guys, or for people who are all in on crypto, any opportunity cost of buying a property or whatever is a big, is an expensive endeavor. But maybe you rent something overseas just so you've got a place to go, so it seems more palatable. But I really think there's going to come a time when Americans, I'm friends with a number of people who have renounced U.S., some some you don't. And I think it's going to be the way that a lot of people who realize they're not invincible are going to go.
I think it makes a lot of sense. Like you said, though, I think that there's a perception to a lot of people that it's becoming too late, but I'm sure that you worked them through that process.
Well, I had a guy who came to me about 2 years ago, and he's worked with us on 3 different occasions. And he came to me with a business that was valued at about $150 million. And he said, well, what am I going to do? It's too late. Well, the company just went public, and his share was worth $500 million. So I get it. I get that it would have been very uncomfortable and perhaps difficult for him. He would have had to sell some of his shares. There are ways you can work around that. You can delay it. You can give yourself some time to accumulate the money, what have you. But, I don't think it's ever late to do the thing that makes the most sense if you think the market is moving up. Obviously, I talk to people that I'm working with to make sure they feel comfortable in the direction things are going. Right now, most people are pretty bullish. I wouldn't want someone to renounce with $5 million, pay the tax, and then next year they have $500,000. So that is an issue. I have day traders who are going through the same issue. Stock day traders, forex traders. I hope they keep the Midas touch. But ultimately, we all make our own decisions, and I think that it's never too late if things are going in the right direction.
That totally makes sense. So where does Bitcoin fit into this process?
Well, I think Bitcoin, if you go around the world, there's a couple different things that people that we work with talk about. Number one is a lot of people don't want to get married. They have girlfriends or they have boyfriends or whatever, and that's obviously not as friendly in a lot of countries around the world where all they understand is marriage. I think a lot of countries still don't really understand Bitcoin. I think in a number of ways that's good because they have no regulations. It can basically be tax-free. And I think it's a matter of, finding a place where you can go and choose your tax rate. Finding a place where you can go where what you're doing is respected and they're not trying to regulate it. I just saw news come out of Malaysia and Indonesia recently talking about how they want to lower taxes and how they're not going to impose new types of taxes that all these other countries are talking about. So if you look at a country like that, Portugal, people talk about for crypto. There's other, tax-friendly countries. I think that some fiat is going to possibly be necessary here. What I tell people is I've had crypto guys where they, what's your net worth? $100 million. And I figure this guy can surely, show he has $40,000 in the bank to get a residence permit in Costa Rica or something. And no, he can't. So I do think that having a little bit of fiat exposure will allow you to, demonstrate to bureaucrats that you should be let into their tax-friendly country in some cases. I think it's a lot easier and necessary in most cases to pay for, let's say, a second passport if you're doing citizenship by investment. It's the fastest way right now to get a second citizenship. And so if you're saying, whether it's my plan A and I'm looking to get out of Dodge now, or I'm looking for a plan B to sit on that I can bail from Dodge at any time I want without having to wait 6 months, citizenship by investment probably is the fastest if you have someone doing the paperwork for you efficiently. And so that you're going to want some fiat exposure, I would generally say. So I think that the crypto, I'm agnostic to what you do with the crypto. I think it's just a matter of how you present yourself to the world so you can get into the places that you want.
Sure. So that accounts for the person who's already in crypto, has acquired wealth in Bitcoin and wants to move. What about the person who has no exposure to Bitcoin, but is a digital nomad, a capitalist nomad, as you're talking about? Do you suggest that they gain exposure to Bitcoin?
Well, I've gained exposure to crypto, and here's my thing. I've learned from years of doing this, I don't judge. So some people tell me I don't have any crypto. I'm not here to proselytize to them that they should get it. I think sometimes when I ask people that question from a tax planning perspective, I had someone yesterday, he's got $80,000 in crypto. I said, where do you think it's going? Is it going to 120? In which case, probably not a big tax issue we're going to focus. If you think it's going to go 100x, then we should focus on that. An $8 million capital gain is something that we probably want to talk about, right? So, here's my thing. I left the U.S. in the most profound way. I'm sure I'm not on the top of their Christmas card list because I make videos, I talk about it, I come on shows like yours, and I tell people how I left. But that said, 99% of people are not going to do what I've done. I mean, 99.9% of people. I think I've gained more freedom than practically anybody on earth. I have no regrets. But, most people, they grow up in, Danbury, Connecticut, and that's where their grandmother lives, and they feel comfortable. And no matter what I say, they just remember that grandma lives in Danbury, Connecticut, and they're not going to do anything about it. And in a sense, I guess they're going where they're treated best. I think that they're doing it emotionally. I think they're doing it from, feeding into the propaganda of this is the best country on earth, and even when statistically it's not. But I'm not going to tell someone to get into crypto. But if someone's in crypto, I'm going to say, let's do this in the most tax-friendly way possible. So if you're already nomadic, then let's make sure that you are nomadic, because so many people who leave Canada, Australia, etc., they just leave. They don't do the proper work to exit the tax system. They keep ties to those countries, and 5 years later, they get a knock on the door. If you got that knock on the door 2 years after a huge crypto gain, you're going to wish you had taken the time to button that up. So for the non-American, if you've already left your country, make sure it was done properly. Make sure you have a tax documentation, memorandum, an opinion of some kind, whatever, to evidence that you truly are living in Dubai or Malta or Portugal, and that's where you're going to be taxed and no one else is going to bother you.
It sounds like the bottom line, though, among all of this is you have to be willing to make the commitment. You can't fake it. People, you hear people talking in the crypto community about, oh, I'll just get the other passport, or, oh, I'll establish a residence in Puerto Rico, but I won't really live there.
Oh, yeah, that one. I love that one. I mean, again, I don't want to pick on anyone, but this, I hear that I'm going to get on a pontoon boat or something, and I'm going to sneak back into Miami, and the Coast Guard, they don't defend those waters, so they'll, I'll just slip right in like a hot knife through butter. They figured it out. And I have people who call me and say, I just had a gentleman recently where I said, I think you're confused that just getting the second passport doesn't change your residential tax status. Your country taxes you based on the fact that you live there. So the United States taxes you no matter where you live as a citizen. It's citizenship-based taxation. Most other developed countries in the world, with the exception of Singapore, for example, tax you on a residential basis. If you meet the criteria of that being your tax home, generally by days spent or by your center of life, your closer connection, whatever, you live there. That's where they're going to tax you. And so you can't just live in Canada and say, well, Canada taxes me, but I'll own my crypto as a St. Lucian. That doesn't work. They figured that out. Just the same way if you're a business owner, you can't go and incorporate in Belize, fly to Belize for 1 day a year to have your corporate board meeting, and then go back to Canada for 364 days a year. They figured that one out. So the commitment is you actually need to not only move your assets, but move yourself, move your tuchus out of wherever it is that you are to a tax-friendly jurisdiction, or do as I do and have a paper home, but then move around nomadically.
Makes sense. So you touched on the person who lives in Danbury, Connecticut, and wants to be near their grandmother, and the idea that they're living where they're treated best. I know that that's one of your core concepts. Can you talk about going where you're treated best?
Yeah, so my 5 magic words, go where you're treated best. My father said that. I don't think he realized what he was starting, but he told me that back in the mid-90s when I was 12 or so. And the idea was he gave me this great permission slip because as I recall, some of my friends at that age were talking about how, my mom said when she gets old, I have to take care of her. And I told my parents and they said, listen, we've lived in what we think is a great country, but my father saw the writing on the wall 25 years ago and said, this country is heading in the wrong direction. You're going to have an unstoppable velocity, momentum against successful people. And we've seen that, and it's gotten worse. And he said, this probably won't be the best place for you. So if you want to live not in, Cleveland, Ohio, or the suburbs thereof, not in the state of Ohio, heck, not even in the United States, because probably, we lived in Ohio, and he realized that was kind of going downhill to a certain extent. It was kind of the past, and he stayed there just for our family. He realized the U.S. was the past. And so my idea is, why would you stay anywhere where you're not treated the best? If you're a business owner, or if you're an investor right now in the United States, or most Western countries, you are the enemy. I mean, AOC, right? We all know AOC, the congresswoman from New York. She's like, what? She's 21 years old, and she's doing everything. She's, between whatever. And she just tweeted the other day, tax the rich. And everyone's like, oh, that's great. But what are the rich? Where I lived as an adult in the U.S., in Arizona, not exactly the most blue of blue states. They did vote for Biden. They did they do 2 Democratic senators now. But when I was there, it was pretty red. And so they just imposed, basically, they doubled the income tax on rich guys. What's the threshold? $250,000. Now, you're not starving on $250,000, but with the inflation rate and the fact that, everyone's making money online, I mean, maybe it's just my own little bubble here, but, I'm talking to people who make $1 million, $5 million, $20 million a year, and there's plenty, there's normal people. $250,000 is not exactly like, you're not flying private jets for $250,000, but they're going to double your tax rate. You're probably not flying. If you take one vacation a year, maybe you're flying first class, but you're right. I mean, I'm calculating, we came from Belgrade to Colombia, and I'm guessing it would probably cost $250,000 to fly private. So, but these people have no concept of money, because as I learned growing up, if you make $50,000 a year and the next door neighbor makes $60,000 a year, he's a rich jerk. And that's all people understand. He's got a little bit nicer car, right? They go to the amusement park more often this summer, or they go to the nice movie theater. And that's the context people think in of envy. And so for me, I don't want to be associated with those cultures. And for me, living outside of them, being a citizen outside of them, and having my tax plan outside of them means whatever AOC wants to think up is not my problem anymore.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So that said, do you see any country where you would settle, or do you think that you'll continue to be nomadic perpetually?
Well, so let me clarify on Nomad Capitalist, and then I'll touch on, go where you're treated best some more. Nomad Capitalist to me was the idea that you're open to the world, that you have a mindset that's open to different opportunities, and that it's kind of like, if you look at Mongolia. I was in Mongolia a couple years ago. They're famous for the Mongolian steppe, right? They have the nomads, and they follow the herd, right? And whenever the herd moves, they move. And so for a long time, the herd was in the United States. Jim Rogers talked about if you were smart in 1800, you moved to London. 1900, New York. 2000, you moved to Asia, you moved to Singapore. So me personally, even before I figured this stuff out for myself, how to lower my taxes, I didn't want to stay in one place. That's my personal decision. Taxes or no, I like spending a couple months in Bogota. You have the Latino culture. You spend a couple months in Kuala Lumpur. You pop into Eastern Europe. You're on the beach. I have 6 properties now that I spend time in, that I control my environment. But if you want to live in Dubai or Portugal or Vanuatu or Panama year-round, you can do that. It certainly limits your options in terms of tax-friendly places. If you spend 2 months a year in Colombia, they're not going to bother you. You spend 12 months, they're going to bother you. So will I settle down? I don't know. Perhaps not. I like to tell my Mrs. H, my wife we call her, I like to say maybe when we're 50, we'll get the dog she wants and we'll live somewhere who knows where. But I think that going where you're treated best is creating your own lifestyle. I also think it's picking from the buffet. So where you live is not where you're incorporated. It may not be where your tax residence is. It may not be where you bank if you're using the fiat system. It may not be take the best that each place has to offer. You look at a place like Singapore. For me, outside of networking opportunities, it's 10 times the price for housing is what I pay in Kuala Lumpur next door. It's a little bit too sterile for me. I don't have to be in Singapore, so I say, why would I? I would rather be in Malaysia. And if you looked at the last year with the lockdowns, we had a lot more opportunities to travel within Malaysia. So that said, Singapore is perhaps one of the safest places to bank, one of the best places to store precious metals if you have them. So there's purposes for it. Meanwhile, do I want to invest in real estate in Singapore or Malaysia? No, I think in Asia it's Cambodia, right? So I'm going to take the best of everything. And as opposed to my family, which talked about moving to New Zealand in 1996 or 7, and it was basically, let's move everything to New Zealand. Now it's, let's move each thing to where that place is number one. If Singapore is not the number one place to live by your metrics, you don't live there. If it's number one for something else, then you do that something else. How can Nomad Capitalist help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to make sure you get our new video every day. Number 2, get a copy of Nomad Capitalist, the book. You'll learn a lot of my personal experiences over a dozen years of studying this stuff, as well as exactly some of the strategies that you can use to build your Nomad Capitalist plan. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start, but you want to come and learn from my team and I, you want to come and mingle with like-minded people, learn more about our live conference, Nomad Capitalist Live. It's coming up soon. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to lower your taxes, get a second passport, or build the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle of your dreams, go to nomadcapitalist.com and click on Become a Client.